Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and it's time to talk about the Deadpool movie. So for this movie, you guys have probably heard me mention it a few times in various vlogs and other things, and I was a little bit worried that they were just going to go over the top to try to appeal to the people that don't actually know much about the character, to just kind of be like that dumb humor, over the top, kind of just crazy, annoying type of movie. Luckily, they didn't do that. They did a really, really good job with this movie. I'll say right off the top, very, very well done. I loved the movie. I thought it was really good. It's not really the kind of movie you can compare to other superhero movies. Obviously, Deadpool's a very different character, but the movie was a very different movie. They didn't throw tons of money at it. You know, it wasn't a big budget movie. It was very low budget. And so it's not really the same type. And it was an R-rated movie, so it was different in that regard also. So it's worth noting, it's not the same type of superhero movie. It's very, very different. But that worked well for it. They did a really good job making it what it was supposed to be. So I was very, very happy with it. One of the things that the Deadpool movie was being kind of touted for, if that's even the right saying, I don't know if it is or not. But one of the things that everybody was talking about, and some people were concerned about, myself included, was the jokes, the humor. You know, Deadpool had to be over the top. He had to make jokes throughout the movie. He had to break that fourth wall, as they quite obviously pointed out. And so it would have been very easy for them to go over the top, especially with TJ Miller in the movie. I'm not the biggest fan of him. I find that his humor is a little juvenile in most cases. Luckily, he wasn't a problem in the movie at all. I kind of liked his character. He did a pretty good job, so that was a good thing. And then as far as the rest of the humor and the jokes and everything, there's a very fine line before you go just too far and it becomes annoying and repetitive. They didn't cross that line. There were some things that I feel like they just kind of put it in there to put it in there, and it didn't necessarily add anything. But it wasn't a bad thing. It was fine. Even the stuff that I didn't particularly find funny, it didn't really take anything away. So no big deal. Don't worry about that. If you were of the same mindset that I was, that it was just going to be over the top and get repetitive and not good, it didn't go that far. It was fine. It was okay. Most of it was funny. The stuff that wasn't didn't land, but it wasn't like to the point where it was a bad thing. So that was okay. No big deal there. As far as the swearing and vulgarity, it wasn't too bad. Obviously, there was swearing. That doesn't bother me at all. I was worried it was going to be too vulgar, because for me, that's just not appealing. It's not enjoyable. They didn't go too far. It was definitely in there. There's no question about that. It was in there. But it wasn't too bad. I think a comparison that I made was Horrible Bosses, especially number 2, was way worse than this. And Horrible Bosses 1, which was still pretty vulgar and bad, was still worse than Deadpool. So I think they used the right amount of restraint, and I think it ended up being for the better. If they went over the top, it was going to be a detriment to the film, and they didn't do that. It was pretty good in that regard. One thing that people didn't really worry about too much, at least as far as I could tell, is the casting. Everybody thought Ryan Reynolds would do really well, and then all of the supporting cast, nobody really talked about it that I saw. And I think they did a good job casting the various people. Partly, that's because none of the characters in the movie were of any import, really, other than Colossus. Negasonic Teenage Warhead, that's way out of left field, that character. And then they changed the character almost completely for the film anyway, so it didn't really matter who that person was as long as they did a good job. And the girl that was playing that character, I don't know her name offhand, it was her first film, I guess, her first big film. She did a good job. I liked her, I liked the character, so that was fine. Gina Carano as Angel Dust, that's another character they kind of had the same powers, the original character and then the one in the movie with the super strength, but again, not like a big deal, so it didn't really matter, but she did a good enough job with it, and she had some cool scenes, so that was good. And then the main bad guy, Ajax, which, I don't know, I didn't look up if he's a real character or not, but he, again, not like a big, good villain. He was fine. He got the movie to where it needed to be, but again, it didn't really matter, but he was fine too, so everything worked out nicely. The casting was good. Everything felt right. There wasn't anybody that really stood out as being like kind of shoehorned in, so that was good. I thought that was good. good casting, good acting, good everything, really. It worked out nicely. So, again, another good point for the movie. The movie did rely on special effects, but not to the degree that I thought they were going to. For the action scenes in particular, we saw in the trailers that they were definitely going to have to use some CGI for Deadpool flipping around and jumping and doing more acrobatic and heroic type of things than a normal person can do. But the way they did it worked pretty well. They did a good job meshing it all together, having the CGI up against the regular stuff, and then the CGI for the face mask for the eyes and things. It worked out really well. They didn't go over the top, probably because they couldn't afford it, but it all looked good. It all worked. I didn't notice any spots that stood out as being particularly fake looking. Whereas in Age of Ultron, I did notice that a few times. So that just goes to show the budget doesn't necessarily determine the quality. So that was a really good thing. And then even with Colossus, he was sweet in this movie. I don't know about some of the conversations he had, some of the character development he had that could have gone either way. I don't know. It wasn't enough to be a problem. But as far as the way he looked, really, really good. Perfect as far as I'm concerned, Colossus. I really liked it. He could have been a little more shiny or metallic looking, but that's just nitpicking, and it didn't bother me personally. I've just heard some people had that gripe. I thought he was really cool, and the CGI looked really good on him. Very nice to see a more classic looking Colossus, so I was really psyched about that. So pretty much the CGI and special effects again, really good. The gunplay was really cool, so we can kind of segue from special effects into action. The way they did the gunplay with the swords and everything, very good. Very, very good. Obviously, Deadpool has to be a dynamic type of fighter. That's just the way he is. And they portrayed that very well. The slow motion was used in the right spots. It wasn't too much. It wasn't overly done. It was just enough so that you could see what was going on, specifically when they wanted you to. And the rest of it was still pretty nice and flowy. It was really good action, whether it was shooting or punching or kicking or teabagging or whatever you have. It was all good. Again, very good. Most of this movie was really, really well done. Except for the things that weren't. And luckily, the things that weren't big things. We had some continuity issues, which to me were obvious. And maybe the people weren't paying attention and they didn't notice it, so it wasn't a big deal. And ultimately, even if you did notice it, it's not a huge deal. But minor spoiler, not a plot point, just a minor spoiler, action-oriented spoiler, so it depends on how you determine your spoilers, but be warned, for the rest of the video, I'm going to mention a few spoilery type things. Not a big deal, though, so if you're not super stickler, don't worry. Deadpool gets stabbed in the head at one point, right in the side of the head with a knife, and he pulls it out, and like the very next scene, there's no wound or anything, no blood, nothing. It's completely normal looking. And then the scene after that, it's back to having a wound. So things like that. I guess it's probably because they had to cut it together due to budget constraints and cuts and things. So it does take you out of it a little bit. So it wasn't great. At one point, after he gets his hand cut off, or he cuts his hand off, he doesn't have his swords in the sheaths on his back. And he jumps into the garbage truck. And then all of a sudden, they're just there again. So maybe they did it on purpose just because they could get away with it and they needed him to have his swords, or they didn't want to spend the time of him getting the swords back, or whatever it was. It's noticeable if you're paying attention to the movie. It doesn't break the movie, but it's noticeable. Or, for instance, when he does cut his hand off, the bad guy didn't see that happen. So last time the bad guy sees him, he's got both hands. And then the next time the bad guy sees him, he's got both hands. But he references his limbs growing back, which could just be that he's aware that Deadpool's able to do it, or he's heard about it or something. So it's not a big deal. But just things like that, they are noticeable. So I kind of wish they weren't in there, but obviously they were very minor, so it wasn't a big deal for me at all. Like I said about the humor, it only takes you out of the flow very tiny bit here and there, so it's not a big deal. So as far as gripes, those are it. That's it. The humor, maybe a little bit, and then the continuity, little things like that. That happens in most movies anyway, so it's not a big deal at all. So, taking everything, like the good stuff and the bad, all of it put together, you get a really solid film. But not a perfect film, and that's a good thing, because you don't need it to be perfect, and it leaves room for improvement. So we know there's going to be a sequel at this point, and we know that they can make it better. This one was really good. I'd give it, if I was into rating systems, maybe an 8 or a 9 out of 10 for what it was. I don't want to compare it to other things because this is very unique. So for what it was supposed to be, what it was trying to do, they nailed it. 8 or 9 out of 10. Gives them room to improve. Even if the other one's only an 8 or 9 out of 10 still, they can still make it better for what it is. If that makes any sense. Hopefully it does. But I really enjoyed the movie. I'm going to go see it again. Hopefully my opinions don't change after I see it again. But I'd like to hear what you guys thought. Like I said, I really, really liked it. I'm not the hugest Deadpool fan, but I do like the character. And I think they did a really good job. Lots of fun. Definitely recommend the movie. And that'll do it for this discussion. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next video.